transfer your faith from yourself to Christ. Why? Because he's more reliable than you are.
However, for me, having something reliable to believe in doesn't suit the kind of lifestyle that I enjoy. What makes me happy is chaos.
Do I like you? You are awesome.
I support. So it's a position of people choosing what they want to believe and not
beautiful
needing to believe something.
Thank you.
Just so you know, you've got
That's
something like
the
that.
best reason to reject Christ. Because I am outraged over date rape, the abuse of an innocent child, and that is why I cannot be a moral relativist. Because moral relativism does not square with my experience of life. If morality is relative, I have no basis for being outraged over date rape or the abuse of an innocent child. What is, and it's all relative.
Moral relativism isn't the idea that people don't have innate moral reactions to moral situations. It's the idea that it's not concreted in any actual absolute truth, any beyond natural absolute truth. Moral relativists, we do expect to see people like you to be outraged by date rape and things like that. Moral judgments are a universal truth. Everyone believes that we have judgments about the way that we look at moral situations, but moral relativism doesn't mean that we don't believe that moral ideas even exist. Moral ideas, it's again, it's concreted in a form of reality that's just different than supernatural. Your belief is that moral absolutes are concrete in the supernatural. Moral relativists will say that, well, it's born out of people's innate instincts about moral situations, and that's why we see such moral differences across different cultures. A lot of people don't agree on specific moral questions. There are some that, you know, we all baseline agree because they're instinctually some of the most important to us. Don't murder. Across the board, across humanity, most people will believe that. Now, you'll have some people who were born and probably have something wrong with them that affects them and makes them look at the question a little bit differently. But across the board, there are baseline morals that most cultures will agree because they serve our instincts. Don't murder, don't lie, don't steal. These types of things are universally positive for all members of all societies. But again, morals are relative in the sense that there are certain societies that have different opinions about different things. You've said yourself, back in the days of the Bible, it was morally incorrect to cut your hair short because it made you look like a prostitute. That was the moral of the time. And because the social circumstances have changed in the way that we look at that issue today, we wouldn't say that that's a moral judgment. Morals tend, I just want to make concrete that that's the idea of moral relativism, not the idea that, oh, well, morals they're this fictitious, crazy, nonsensical thing, and everyone has their own opinions, and whatever you think matters. So, but, and I don't think that a belief that has its morals rooted in absolute truth is evident of its merit. I mean, you can say, yes, we all feel that we have moral truths. We feel moral truths in the universe, and therefore that feeling points to the idea that, yes, there are actual moral truths. I don't think that the feeling of moral truths has anything to do with its truth in any respect. I think that it can be an easy perception to mistake. If it's a natural instinct, then we would perceive it as something that's just innately true. But what was your experiential argument again?
Very simple. Nuremberg trials, 1946 to 1949. 24 Nazi officers being tried. Brilliant Nazi officer. He stands up, looks the Allied judge in the face, and says, "Who do you think you are? Coming from outside our culture of Germany, Nazi Germany, to judge us? You have no right to do that." These 24 Nazi officers simply did what their culture called them and taught them to do. The Nuremberg trials shut down. He was a brilliant guy. Until Robert Jackson stood up and said, wait a second, there is a law above the law of a culture. And according to that law, gassing Jews is evil. And the Nuremberg trials kicked back into gear. What was Robert Jackson appealing to? The American Council was appealing to a moral law above the law of a culture, and saying that is why an American, an Englishman, can come to Nazi Germany and try the Nazis and condemn them as being unjust for gassing Jews.
Okay, well, couple points on that. One, the Nazis were tried under international law. It was decided by the entire world that what they did was egregious. So,
Were
in
some
a sense,
Eskimos there?
I'm sorry.
Were some Eskimos there?
I
It wasn't the entire world. Come on, sir. It was
Okay.
the Allies. You know very well it was the Allies. It was the Allies who came in there, and that Nazi lawyer was brilliant. And he pinned those Allies with, who do you think you are, coming to our culture and judging us?
But I will state that higher moral power that you're saying that they were appealing to, I think that it's just indicative of the feelings that most cultures feel. I mean, like that highest sense of moral truth. Yes, it feels incredibly concrete, and it's because it's shared by most of humanity in a large respect. And even if I was to concede to your point that, oh, okay, well,
You're not going to concede, so let's go on to the next point, okay? You and I both know that. We've talked long enough before. You're not going to concede, so let's forget it, okay? The next, you asked me the question about my experience, okay? So the experience that I've had of love, I'm still answering you, okay? And I know well enough, I know you well enough because we've talked before that you're not going to concede, okay? So fair, you know, I'm sorry. So, love. I experience love. I dish out love. I also dish out apathy and hatred. I am convinced I don't have to do either. My experience tells me I choose. The existence of love and the existence of free will is solid evidence that there is more to reality than matter and energy. There's got to be some type of God who creates us with a soul. Yes, he creates us matter and energy, but we have a free will. We have a soul, a personhood, individuality.
I will.
That's my experience.
Okay, yeah. I've heard you make the point multiple times when you talk to agnostics or atheists, where you say that their naturalistic worldview means that they only believe in two things, matter and energy. And I would say that there's one other thing that you don't think about very often, which is concept. Naturalists 100% believe in the reality of conceptualism.
What's a concept?
Mathematics. Mathematics is a concept.
Okay,
That is a
fine,
concrete
mathematics.
reality that is not matter, it's not energy, but it's very, very real.
All right.
So that's one thing that opens up the atheistic worldview that you attribute to most people, because we do believe in concept and concept that plays to our emotions. It's not necessarily concrete in matter or energy, but it's the way that objects relate to each other in the universe.
Sure, mathematics is part of the reason I believe God exists. Mathematics, the thinking ability that we have to understand mathematical concepts, the amazing nature of the human mind. Is it more reasonable to think that this human mind comes from the non-rational, or is it more reasonable to believe that this rational mind comes from a rational mind? For me, that's an easy one to answer. And yet what my atheist friends are asking me to believe is this amazing mind that can understand concepts like mathematics comes from the non-rational or the irrational. That is ludicrous for me, philosophically. It is far more reasonable for me to believe the rational mind comes from a rational mind than to believe that the rational mind comes from the non-rational or the irrational. So that's another part of my experience that points me to God of some type.
I think we're going to probably start to get into the whole nothing from nothing debate, the very famous one. I would love to have that conversation with you, because I have such an issue with the nothing from nothing debate, because people constantly, they'll say, you have to concede to the natural law that nothing can come from nothing, and in order to keep this natural law together and to have it make sense, you have to break natural law, and there must be a God. I don't see how it just seems like a conflict of reason to me, that the idea the logic behind God is that he is the only answer to keeping the rational law of nothing can come from nothing into the lexicon of our thinking. You have to have God, because otherwise you would have to concede that nothing could potentially come from nothing, or that we don't know exactly how it could have come into existence.
I'm not saying that. What I am saying is an atheist has made a horrible decision to limit reality. Albert Einstein said, "I know less than 1% of all there is to know." An atheist is someone who says, "I know there is no God. I know there is no mind behind the universe." My point
I'd like
is,
to point out I'm not an atheist.
Come on.
I am an agnostic.
all right, well then people ask me, why are you a theist, Cliff? And I'm a theist because it seems to me to be more reasonable to believe there's an intelligent mind who gave me a rational mind than it is to believe that my rational mind comes from the non-rational or the irrational.
But let's get back to the nothing from nothing argument. What is the most basic reason that you're a theist? Is it that nothing from nothing argument you don't believe?
No, it's not.
Okay.
No.
What is it?
But I've said it out here many, many times, and I'd love Stuart to answer the issue. So Stuart, go to it.
Well, I'm going to hit your first one.
Hi, Stuart.
How are you?
Never spoken to you
Yeah,
before, but it's
no,
good
nice to meet you.
Good to meet you.
Yeah. So let's go back to your emotions question. You started out with saying, let's talk about the emotions, right?
Sure.
And I think you also said self-concept. So let's talk about self-regard, self-concept, identity. How do those form an understanding of, okay, what is the most durable way of looking at yourself? How can a secular position versus a Christian understanding of how you look at yourself give you a better sense of self, more positive emotions, make you happier? Here's my position, and then you go. Since you brought it up, I love that you brought it up, because you're right. We've gone on the moral one, we've gone on all of these so many times. Let's go with the emotions. Me personally, why am I a theist? I am a theist because I agree with Martin Seligman, the book The Weariness of the Self, all these psychological studies today that are saying the secular understanding of the self is as follows. We live in a success, autonomistic, individualistic culture where we are success-oriented beings, and if we are secular, that means you better be successful or you're going to get in some trouble. Some kind of, you're going to criticize yourself in some way, or you're going to receive criticism from somewhere else. Because, hey man, you just weren't a success. So your identity is lost in some way. So me and my psychologist friends would say, you need to find something outside of yourself. So even my Hindu friends, if you find something outside of yourself to live for, God, then all of a sudden you are entering into the equation of, okay, my fragile self doesn't have to stand up for itself and, gosh, find meaning in life, find purpose in life. So you hear self nonstop, right, in our culture today. All of our talk now is self-based. One more second. If you get criticized, you better stand up for yourself, right? You got a hot date tonight? You better be yourself, right? Okay. A man earlier talked about the soul, though, and that's what these psychologists are getting back to. If you want positive self-worth and identity, you need to get away from self-talk, which secularism always goes back to. It's all about the self, right? And you better find something that transcends yourself and understanding of, okay, I have a soul. I'm a little bit more than just being successful here at this university. I'm a little bit more than just figuring out what kind of job I have to do after I graduate, right? So an understanding from the Christian perspective is you have an identity that nothing can shake. The Apostle Paul talked about in 2 Corinthians chapter 4 that he basically puts us in a courtroom setting and says, it doesn't matter what any person thinks about you. I don't even care what I think about myself. It's only what God thinks of me is what counts. And so when I have someone who I'm sitting with who really gets that and understands that, they have a secure identity, self-worth, and an emotional world that is intact because they understand, wow, I am loved by the creator of the universe.
Yes. The Christian philosophy does yield a nice psychological reaction.
You said emotions, so I brought it
Well,
up.
yeah, no, and I tend to agree with that. I know a lot of Christian people. My best friend is an avid Christian. He's very, very sweet, smart guy. It yields a nice way of looking at the world and everything, but I will submit to you that no matter how nice the philosophy is, it does not one iota move it towards the answer of it being true.
Well, you asked the question though.
Well, no. I'm saying I was asking how does that evidence towards its truth, and there's that's not evidence towards.
If it's experiential, if it's in my experience, that's pointing to that's true, right? It's not just evidentially.
Well,
it's not just intellectual. It's got to be experiential. Experiencing it through your emotions as well, right?
What I'm suggesting is
man.
that what you said was that the Christian philosophy is a positive experience. It yields positive results in the minds of its believers. That may be true. But that does not point to
okay, so help me then.
Doctrine
From an atheistic, secular perspective. Agnostic. Help me. How do you form a secure identity? And how, let's take, your emotions are wrecked through suffering, right? How do you deal with suffering as an agnostic? Those two.
That has nothing to do with the truth of the matter. No matter how empty or sad the philosophy that I may hold is, and I don't even personally think that it is. I think it's so open that it
So
lends
it has nothing to do with
itself.
the matter.
Well, excuse me. one
Your
more time.
worldview, your religion, what motivates and drives you has nothing to do with your sense of self, and it has nothing to do with where meaning and purpose comes from.
I'm saying that
I'm lost.
No matter how sad that philosophy might be, or how you view the atheistic philosophy, that doesn't mean that it's not true.
I agree. Totally agree with you.
But that's the point that's being made, and that's
No. It's only a part of the puzzle. It's one little part of the puzzle. We're talking about emotions, right?
Okay.
Experience.
So you're wondering.
I don't know. Yeah.
Right, so you're being intellectually dishonest. You know very well that out here before, you and I have talked, you've asked me why I believe God exists, and I have given you evidence. I've gone intellect to intellect. Now, just now you asked me, okay, now what is it? Is there more evidence that God exists? And I said yes. Intellect, experience, emotions. Remember? And so both Stuart and I have just been explaining the emotional. I agree with you. You should not believe God exists because it makes me feel comfortable. You should not believe in Jesus Christ because Jesus brings me joy. Don't do that. But you asked the question, and we're answering your question, which is, come on, Cliff, there's the intellect, but now you're talking about emotions and experience? What are you talking about? And we were answering the question you asked. So don't boomerang on us now and say, well, you don't expect me to believe in God or Christ because of emotions and experience. You're right. Those are the different angles, though.
I'm suggesting that that's not evidence, because it's not pointing towards the idea of God. It's pointing towards the idea is nice. Really, that like explain to me how emotions or experience is evidence of there being a God.
You bet. Sir, if your experience of life tells you something, I better listen very carefully to your experience. Because your experience is real. Unless you're lying to me. If you're lying to me, shame on you. But if you're telling me, Cliff, I've had this experience, and this has helped me in life, I better listen to you. Because that's your very real substantive. It's your life, sir. It's your experience. So we're standing here saying the experience of knowing Christ is that there comes a secure identity of person. And what he does is he works with mentally sick people. And he watches mentally sick people get healthy. Well, guess what? That's good. I hope you don't need me to tell you that.
I will just fundamentally disagree with the idea that the Christian philosophy yielding the result of a positive identity or an identity at all is evident of its merits as a truthful statement. So I will.
Okay.
We just fundamentally disagree.
All right.
That's fine.
You bet.
Now, let's let this
All right.
go.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Good to see you. Good to talk to you. Good to talk to you.
It's a very humanistic thing that we all have empathy built into us, that we believe, that we see something going on and we think to ourselves, I don't want this to happen to me.
Right.
That is the basis of empathy, and that is also ends up what drives most ethical concerns is I don't want this to happen to me unless I know these justifications.
Part of it.
Yeah. But the thing is that with different cultures and different societies, what we see as good and what we see as bad, because we'll see different end results to different things that happen to people, our ideas of what we want and what not we want will change. So that we all have different guiding principles for what we define as good and bad ethics, because good and evil. I'm sorry, I've drank a lot of coffee today. My thoughts are not in a straight line.
It's okay. I'm with you.
Yeah. So then we see that, but then we basically believe that our ethic principles and what we go with good and evil, we believe that based on what we have seen and how we have seen that be experienced by other people, not necessarily by a higher power or religion. It's from a more humanistic brain, person-to-person view.
Right. But you see, what I'm trying to do right now is I'm trying to reach down inside of you and hit a button. Your conscience. I am convinced, sir, that you have a conscience that ties you into objective morals. That's part of why, not totally why, but that's part of why you experience guilt the same way I experience guilt when we do something that is objectively wrong. Well, guess what? The only way there can be an objective moral is if there is some type of moral lawgiver.
Yes.
If that moral lawgiver is culture, the power elite, or the individual, then it's relative. But your conscience, I don't think, tells you that. I think your conscience tells you, correct me if I'm wrong, the abuse of an innocent child is never good. It's objectively wrong to abuse an innocent child. Now you've got to ask yourself, how can that be true? How can that value of an innocent child be substantiated? Only if there's a God who created that child with value, innate value, and the person who abuses that child is doing that which is absolutely evil. Otherwise, it's just a social construct. Abusing an innocent child is wrong.
Well, yes, and it also goes again. It also goes again as an evil act because we feel that if I were a child, I would not want to be abused in that way. So that's the idea. I don't fully believe the idea that God or a higher power gives us this feeling of moral and ethical values.
Right.
We learned that.
What I'm saying though is your conscience tells you that there is a real value.
Yes.
That innocent child is really significant, really valuable.
Depending on from person to person, because everyone will perceive this situation.
Exactly. If there is no God, that child does not have innate, absolute value. If there is no God, that child only has the value that I give it, or you give it, or culture gives it, which means it's relative. But if there is a God who created that child with innate value, then regardless of culture, regardless of mom and dad being abusive, regardless of the individual who comes in to stalk the child abuse is absolutely wrong. Well, the only way it can be absolutely wrong is if that child has innate value, and the only way the child can have innate value is if they're not just a bag of chemicals, not a cosmic accident, but a creation of God. See, that's why no moral relativist can live that out. You can't live out moral relativism. Because you know down deep with your conscience that certain things are really wrong and other things are really right.
Yes, but due to the fact that we cannot be in every place at the exact same time, that we are not Superman, that we cannot fly around the world and save every child or any person in danger, our brains have ended up developing certain self-defense mechanisms that allow us to shut down certain parts of our emotions, so we feel significantly less empathy for people outside of the situations that we are within. We see children like being kidnapped and turning into child soldiers in Africa. We are not suddenly immediately filled with this urge to go to Africa and go out and rescue them.
Right.
Yet, if we believe in God and we believe in this higher power, then we should also feel that because God has given these children such inherent value, we must do His will and go to Africa and rescue these children. Yet it's very hard. Yet you're standing here and talking to me about this debate, which I'm really enjoying. But we're not hopping on a plane to go rescue child soldiers.
And you have just put your finger on a great point. That is why followers of Christ have gone to Africa, South America, and Asia, and Uganda, to communicate Christ, to bring hospitals, medical attention, education, clothing, food. Bravo. That's exactly what motivates them. And my brother, who's a transplant surgeon, went to Nepal with all of his medical expertise. And he went to Africa, motivated by his love for Christ and his love for hurting people. And that is what followers of Christ have done for 2,000 years. And that's why Christianity spread so.
Fantastic.
Because instead of vacating the cities where plagues were, the Christians stayed in the cities where plagues were, getting the plague, but helping dying people.
Fantastic. I'm not attacking Christianity. Christianity has done great things around the entire world. The church has done a lot of good things, and a lot of people also argue that it's done a lot of bad things.
It has done a lot of bad things, the church
I
has.
don't follow very closely to what's both good and bad things, because I believe in moral relativism, and my ideas of good and evil are subject to my own experiences. So, but the other thing is that
if you're a moral relativist, how can you tell someone that that was wrong?
how do I tell someone?
Because you're a moral relativist, how can you look into the face of someone and say, your racist attitude is wrong?
I don't tell people that.
You don't tell people that?
No, I don't. Everyone is welcome to their own belief and their own opinion, and sometimes when someone has an opinion that differs very strongly from me, I tend to just ignore it, or I will go with the assumption that they have their own belief. But that's sidetracked.
I respect you intellectually. That's
Thank
great.
you very much. But aside from what I was going to say, I just wanted to also I also wanted to make a point too, is that Christianity, Catholicism, all of these religions, they are schools of thoughts, and that they are just ways of conditioning us, giving us a set of rules and guidelines to follow throughout our life. A set of ethics and moral code to follow.
Sure.
And
that does exist.
Everyone is welcome to follow their own.
That does exist. Catholicism exists as a system. Protestantism exists as a system. The Southern Baptist Church exists as a system. Sure. I'm not out here saying I think you should put your faith in any one of those systems. I'm out here saying the historical evidence of the way Jesus lived, taught, died, and rose from the dead is he's the truth. Put your faith in him, not in a system, not in an institution called Catholicism or Protestantism or Southern Baptistism. Instead, put your faith in Jesus Christ. Why? Because he is more credible than any of the options. Why? Because his lifestyle, teachings, death, and resurrection are off the charts. Nobody has come close to it. That's why you should put your faith in him, because the evidence is he's reliable.
If you also choose to believe all of that evidence, I've put my faith in myself and just random chance and happenstance.
You put your thanks, man. Finally, it's a privilege to meet you.
Oh, cool.
I've asked so many guys out here. Okay, you don't believe in Christ, fine, but you have faith. Who do you put your faith in? And they say, I don't know. You've been brutally honest.
Yes.
You're right. Gosh, I thank you.
I don't believe in Jesus. I don't believe in God.
But you went further. You said you put your faith in yourself.
Yes.
Okay. Now let me tell you why I can't do that.
Yeah.
All right? The reason that I can't put my faith in myself is because at times my reason breaks down and I dabble in the irrational.
Oh yes, everyone does.
Okay. Secondly, the reason I can't put my faith in myself is because at times I do good, but at other times I do evil. I'm not totally reliable. Thirdly, the reason that I cannot put my faith ultimately in myself is that I'm 62 years old and I still love playing basketball, but you can barely get a credit card underneath my sneakers when I jump now. And I can promise you when I was in college I could jump a lot higher. It's called the aging process. It ain't for sissies. It's not fun. Okay? So that is why, for me to put my faith ultimately in myself would be a big mistake. Because the evidence is, I am not very reliable. When you look at Jesus Christ, at his amazing life, teachings, death, and then resurrection from the dead, he is so much more reliable than I am, there's no comparison. So that's why I plead with you, transfer your faith from yourself to Christ. Why? Because he's more reliable than you are.
However, for me, having something reliable to believe in doesn't suit the kind of lifestyle that I enjoy. What makes me happy is
Man,
chaos.
do I like you. You are awesome.
I support So it's a position of people choosing what they want to believe and not
Beautiful.
they need to believe something.
Thank you.
Just so you know, you've got
That's
something
the
like that
best
for your
reason to reject Christ. Because I want to live my way. I don't want Jesus interfering with my sexual lifestyle, the way I live for money, a career. I don't want anybody telling me how to live my life. I want to live my life. You're absolutely right. That's very tempting for me.
Yeah, because we all follow our own moral guidelines and guidebooks, and religion is one that is given to us. The Bible is telling us how to live, and other people will make their own decisions.
Yep. And that is the best reason to be atheist or agnostic, because then I'm free to do whatever I want to do.
Yeah, and not push the belief onto other people's.
Well, when you're free to do whatever you want to do,
With respect and kindness towards other people following
yeah,
ethical guidelines.
and you're going to try and convince me that you're always respectful,
Oh, no, not at all.
because I certainly am not.
Goodness, not at all. It's impossible to constantly be respectful.
Yeah. All right.
All right, anyways, I forgot why I was talking.
It's good to meet you.
I'm probably a little bit different than a lot of the people that have come up and spoken to you. They come from the side who believes the opposite and wants to hear your rebutts to it. I am on a path towards Christ at the moment, and that was something that has changed from the path of atheism that I was on for a long time, and I'm beginning to learn. However, the path that I took was not what my understanding is a traditional one, where you come to believe in a God and then you imbibe the morals that are espoused by that God. It was, I saw the value of Judeo-Christian values on the world, and I
Right.
saw the overall beneficial effect that it has had, and I saw the vast quantities of people that imbibe those values,
Yeah.
and I took that as my leap of faith into beginning to believe in God.
Awesome.
So, that being said, just understand that the questions I'm going to ask come from a place of sincerity and
You bet.
genuine doubt.
Thank you, sir.
I've heard most of the anti-apologetics arguments, the atheist arguments, and so, and I've heard the apologetic remarks to them, and so I'm just going to kind of go through a few that I would love to hear your opinion
bet.
on. The first would be, when people are born into this world, you know, it's what 1.6 billion of the people in the world are Christian. However, the rest aren't. And so if they're born into, say, Pakistan, chances
Yep.
are they'll be Muslim. If they're born into Africa, chances
Yep.
are they'll be a variety of different religions. If they're born into India, they'll be Hindu, etc., etc. How do you reconcile that with Jesus Christ's divinity if there's a good chance that if they don't ever leave those places, they'll never hear the word of God and they'll never have the chance to be able to embrace it?
Excellent question. I do not know how God will judge those who never had the opportunity to hear about Christ. Why? Because Christ never addressed the question. So I'd be lying to you if I would say, well, Jesus said this. But Jesus and the Bible make 5 points that apply to your question. First point, God is just. Nobody's going to get ripped off. God's character is just. He will judge justly. Second point, the only reason people go to hell, eternal separation from God, is because they chose to live their life separate from God. Third point, there are going to be many people in heaven who never heard the word Jesus. Hebrews chapter 11 in the New Testament lists some of these people by name. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Rahab, a Gentile prostitute. Obviously never heard the word Jesus. They were born hundreds, if not thousands of years before Christ. They're going to be in heaven. Fourth point, the only reason they're going to be in heaven, the only reason any of us are going to be in heaven, according to Christ, is because he bled and died on a cross to pay the penalty for our wrongdoing.
You were debating with somebody who was here earlier about how
Right.
you believed that for you was evidence that God existed because because you couldn't, because we all believe that abusing a child was morally wrong and therefore morality couldn't be relevant. I mean, couldn't be relative. Is that not what you said?
Not because we all believe it. I was sharing my experience. My experience is that if somebody abuses an innocent child, I am convinced that is absolutely, objectively, no exceptions, evil,
Yes.
is objectively wrong. The only way you can have an objective moral is if there is some moral lawgiver who has given a child value, has defined the value of justice, given us consciences that we can understand that. Does that make sense?
But morality isn't absolute. That argument falls apart.
Pardon?
But we know morality isn't absolute.
He's not?
It's not absolute.
Okay, that's where we disagree.
Well, do you,
Slap. That's absolutely evil, I would argue.
you think premarital sex is wrong? That's
Do I
morality,
think
right?
premarital sex is wrong?
Yes.
Because I'm a follower of Christ, yes, I'm convinced that premarital sex is wrong.
Okay, but then your morality isn't based. Your morality is based on a 2,000-year-old book, then.
No. My morality is based on a conscience that informs me that certain things are right and wrong, and then I have a plumb line to measure my conscience against, which is Jesus Christ and the Bible. So my experience and the Bible.
That doesn't prove that morality isn't relative.
Well, I know it doesn't prove anything, but the question is, what does the evidence point to? And the evidence is that my moral relativist friends, every single one of them, if they are hurt by somebody, looks them in the face and says, you should not have done that. And when they use that language, should, they're appealing to a standard outside of themselves. And they're saying, wake up, smell the coffee, don't do that to me again, because it's wrong.
So you're saying the only way there could be an external standard is with the religion, or with the creator.
Exactly.
But, okay, so here's what I disagree with that. So earlier we were talking about the scientific method,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And also with another debater, you were talking about Darwinism. So since for all of recorded history, humanity has been a social animal, right? That's why we feel our nation in the environment, because we have the ability to work together. Have you ever thought that the standard isn't from an external power or creator, but it's from our own genetics, in the sense that we were evolutionarily designed to work together?
Okay.
Because that's how we can create civilizations and create
Right.
universities and huge institutions that send us to the moon.
Yep. Great. But guess what, Pablo? There are people who are convinced that putting NASA together and sending people to a moon is so evil and unjust in light of the fact that there are people starving on the Earth today, that if you're going to take our limited resources and waste them in sending a rocket ship to the moon, you're evil. Now, who's right? See, if it's all relative, nobody's right, nobody's wrong. But I can promise you, Pablo, if you think that you can give an objective basis for a moral absolute by saying, well, look what we can do. Look at this fine building, this fine university. We can send people to the moon. That's relative, sir.
Okay, but that fallacy also applies to your argument. We have Christians in the KKK who think they're better than black people, but we have Christians who think racism is wrong. So the same fallacy applies to Christianity.
Good. And guess what Dr. Martin Luther King said to the white Christians who supported segregation? He didn't say, oh, shoot, there's no God, there's no Jesus. He said, you white Christians better start taking your Jesus more seriously. Because if you read the New Testament Gospels, seriously, there ain't no way you can support the KKK and segregation. And Dr. Martin Luther King was absolutely right. And you guys don't have to have a PhD in New Testament to know that at Jesus' first sermon in Luke chapter 4, he makes a direct frontal attack on racism and almost gets killed for it. And in his best known parable, the parable of the Good Samaritan in Luke chapter 10, he makes a direct frontal attack on racism by telling how a Samaritan gets on his hands and knees and cleans out the cuts and bandages the wounds of a Jew. And there was all types of racial hatred between Jews and Samaritans in that day. And then Christ says, now you guys go out and love like that. So, Pablo, the point is not because Christians disagree and because they're Christians who are racist, therefore everything's relative. No. The point is you better learn to do exactly what you're trying to do with John chapter 1 and 1 Timothy chapter 2, which is interpret fairly and accurately.
Here's the thing, like, who gets to decide what's fair and what's accurate?
Well,
you can
guess
have
what?
interpretation.
Good. You do for yourself. I do for myself.
you just created a paradox. You're saying that I myself, with my own morals, should know how to interpret it.
No.
But you just said that you base your morality on your religion.
No, I'm not. No. What I'm saying is, you have a brain. You have a conscience. You are responsible to use those to the best of your ability. And if you can honestly go to the New Testament, read the thing, and go away saying, Jesus called for me to have racist attitudes, you are one hurting pup. And John puts it this way in 1 John. You got to read 1 John. John writes, if I say I love God and hate my brother, I'm a liar. Oh, how easy it is to say I love God who I cannot see and hate my brother who I can see. And we still have this marvelous word in our culture, hypocrisy. Good. What does the word hypocrite mean? The word hypocrite is vice's complement to virtue. You call yourself a Christian and you go out and hate, you're a hypocrite.